Alright, this is how Hiko plays Valorant in 5 minutes. Let's go. On a scale of clean, crispy, and cracked, his aim is clean. Although his aim in general is pretty good, his first bullet accuracy isn't the most consistent relative to other pros. He's not always warm because he'll only take fights if he has no utility left, but he can clutch out when he needs to. On bind, he plays Sova. On defense, he starts on the site he thinks the enemies will hit. If a teammate is trying to fight on site, he recon arrows for his teammates to fight with. On A, he likes to use this lineup that hits close to the antenna. If the enemies are planting or rushing a site, he shock darts default to deal damage. When his teammates rotate on site, he drones for info so they can fight. When he has no more utility, he takes a gunfight. If they go on the opposite site, he rotates and then uses his utility backside /CT. If they are rushing through the entrance, he shock darts to stop the push. If they are planting, he shock darts default. If a teammate is on site, he recons to make their gunfight easier. He drones to see if the enemies are on site or leaving. If he has no utility, he'll take a gunfight on site. On offense, if his team tries to go in hookah, he shoots a recon for them. He either does this lineup that hits into hookah, or he does this lineup that clears the entire site except elbow. If his team goes long B, he drones up for info or recons on the rip to see if they're taking the orb. If his team goes short A, he recon arrows backside for info. Then he drones his team for more info as they push in. And finally, he shock darts wherever he sees enemies at. On split, he plays breach. On defense, he starts in A heaven or B male. Just depends where he thinks the enemies are going. If a teammate is trying to fight A main, he flashes to support his teammate on the fight. If he's on site, he fault lines this area for his team. If there's an enemy in the A cubby, he aftershocks it and forces the enemy to swing. If the enemies are going mid, he fault lines for his team to peek or fight safely. If enemies are still at mid, he flashes and peeks to fight. If the enemies go male, he flashes up on the ceiling and peeks. On offense, if his teammates hit B, he fault lines male from market. Then he flashes for his teammates 3 times onto site. First close right, then on default, and finally back pillar. He then goes on site with his team and fights. If his teammates decide to hit male, he fault lines male from market. Then he flashes for his teammates 3 times. First close male, then up male, and finally hell. He then goes on site and fights with his team. If his teammates hit A, he flashes 3 times for his teammates. First he flashes close, then up ramps, and finally up rafters. He then goes on site with his team to fight. On Ascent, he plays Sova. On defense, he starts at the site he thinks enemies will hit, but usually hovers around the mid spawn area for the fast rotate. If it's quiet, he drones up high to get info on all of mid. If there are teammates on site while the enemies are pushing B, he recons through CT smoke to assist his teammate on that fight. If the enemies are planting or rushing site, he uses shock darts to deal damage. If he has drones still, he waits for his teammates and drones for info. When he has no more utility, he looks for a gunfight and goes on site. If there are teammates on site while enemies are pushing A, he recons on the back wall to help his teammates. If the enemies are planting or rushing site, he uses his shock darts to deal damage. If he has drones still, he waits for his teammates and drones for info. When he has no more utility, he looks for a gunfight and goes on site. On offense, if his team tries to go mid, he shoots a recon for bottom mid to get info first. Then he goes to sub Rosa to drone wherever his teammates want to clear. Finally, he shock darts wherever he sees enemies at to deal damage. When he's out of utility, he'll take out his gun and try to trade a teammate. If his team goes long A, he either drones up or uses this recon lineup that hits backside to get info for his team. He then stays in A main as shock darts wherever he sees the enemies at. When he has no more utility, he'll go on site and look for a gunfight. If his team goes B, he recon arrows the tree for info. Then he pulls out his drone and gets more info for his team to push. And finally, he'll shock dart wherever he sees the enemies at from B main. When he has no more utility, he'll go on site and look for a gunfight. On Haven, he plays Sova. On defense, he starts at the site he thinks enemies will hit, but usually starts around B. If he starts B, he does his recon lineup that gets info on grass and mid. If the enemies hit C, he paths to CT and uses utility. If the enemies are pushing fast, he shock darts to deal damage. He then gets info by droning for his team to push onto site. When he has no more utility, he looks for a gunfight and goes on site. If the enemies hit A, he rotates to heaven and uses utility. If his enemies are on site, he recons for his team and shoots through the smoke. If enemies are planting, he shock darts default. He then gets info by droning for his team to push onto site. When he has no more utility, he looks for a gunfight and goes on site. If he starts A, he recons into A lobby to see if there are enemies pushing. If the enemies are rushing, he stays on site and shock darts to deal damage. If he's unsure if the enemies are coming in or retreating, he drones to get info. On offense, if his team goes A, he recons long on the rip to see if anybody is opping or grabbing orb. Then he drones on site to give his teammates info to push up. Finally, he shock darts where the enemies are. If he has no utility, he'll take a gunfight on site. If his team goes C, he gets into cubby and drones on site for his team to push. Then he recon arrows backside for info. Finally, he shock darts where the enemies are. If he has no utility, he'll take a gunfight on site. If he decides to get info in garage, he either drones or recons inside and looks for a ping. If he gets a ping, he wallbangs for the kill. On Icebox, he plays Skye. I don't know why, for the past month and a half, he has not played Sova on Icebox in ranked. On defense, he always starts on A site and either pushes or takes a fight on belt. If he pushes, he'll go under pipes and flash through into a swing if he hears somebody jumping on pipes. If nobody goes A, he commits to flanking mid or B. If he takes the fight on belt, he either plays on top of nest or top screens. If anybody's pushed onto site, he goes to screens and flashes for his team to push forward. If the enemy goes B, he usually paths snowman. He either flashes or dogs to get info on site for his team to push. When he has no more utility, he takes a gunfight on site. On offense, if his team decides to hit A, he'll flash left into screen side to get info and to allow his team to push. He then either dogs or continues to flash for his team to push up onto site. He will generally sit back and get information on either screens push or the rafters peek. If his team decides to hit B, he starts off with a flash that hits top crates so his team doesn't get flashed. He then continues to flash for his team to push up. When he gets around yellow, he dogs for information so his team can fight and plant. Alright, that's it for Hiko. I think personally his playstyle is more of like a utility first kind of thing. That's why I could see people calling him a baiter, but you can never count him out for a clutch. If this video helped you guys, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know who you guys want to see in the comment section below.